Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn Cools, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. I'm joined by Jeremy Rowe today, who is the founding GTM at Vireo, which brings employee-generated content into the B2B world. A topic that I am super excited about because I feel like it's one of the new big things in marketing. So, Jeremy, let's start out with a little bit of your background. I think the way you got into the startup world and at Vireo specifically is already super cool. So I'm going to pass you the mic before we get into all of our topics.
Okay, cool. Well, I just want to say first off, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I've been seeing some of your LinkedIn stuff and yeah, thanks so much for having me on. And I can give a little bit of a brief background, before we jump into the topics and how I kind of got into startups. For reference, yeah, I'm the founding go-to-market at Vireo currently, and this is candidly my first ever real job. And so I'm still a student at Western University. So I'm originally from Canada, grew up in Calgary, Alberta my entire life, and I chose to go to Western University for computer science. And so I would be in my fourth year, senior year right now, but I decided kind of on a whim that I would kind of come down to SF and take a gap year. But that really kind of all started back in my third year. And for my first 2 years of university, I kind of had a lot of fun. I wasn't too worried about the future. And it was really at the beginning of my third year where I was like, okay, let's adopt a little bit more responsibility into my life and let's start looking into what I want my career to look like. At first, I started in finance. All my friends were in Ivy. Ivy is the number one business school in Canada. And so I kind of said, hey, let's set a direction for myself. And I just started grinding for investment banking recruitment. And so I did that for about 8 months, had a couple of search fund internships throughout the school year, and then landed this venture capital internship for the summer, which is just about 18 months ago now. And so, yeah, or actually not 18 months ago. That was about 8 months ago now. Yeah. 8, 9 months ago. But yeah, so throughout summer, it was remote. So I could do a little bit of work remotely and also still do other things. And so throughout this entire time, I was DMing founders, and Eric, my current boss, I DM'd him on a whim through LinkedIn because I've been seeing his content everywhere. And yeah, we hopped on a call and I flew up to Toronto to do a work trial with him, and I landed the job, and it's kind of been the rest is history. And I've been doing sales and growth and kind of a generalist under the sun for the last 8, 9 months here. And yeah, that's a little bit about my background.
This podcast is brought to you by Evelyn Cools Marketing. If you're an early stage B2B tech founder who wants marketing to actually work, you're in the right place. As a fractional head of marketing and growth advisor, I help early stage B2B startups take marketing from 0 to 1 by building the foundations, testing different channels, and scaling what works. I'm currently offering a free strategy call where I do an audit of what you've tried with marketing so far and share practical advice that I believe will make the biggest impact on your growth engine. Visit evelyncools.com to book your free strategy call today. Now back to the episode. It's pretty crazy what you've done in such a short amount of time. And candidly, you're probably the earliest in your career by far that we've had on here. But I think what's so cool about you is that you're bringing this fresh perspective into the B2B marketing world. So I'm just really excited to chat about all of that. Obviously, you also have a background in content. And I know that in our prep call, you talked about, some of the organic content that you've had go viral, or I'd love to just hear a little bit about how this new generation, I feel is just doing the coolest things. So I'd love to hear a little bit of your background in that, and then the perspective that you bring into what I feel is slightly an archaic industry, B2B marketing. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, I think to be completely honest, I've been experiencing a lot of FOMO recently, okay? Because I'm 21 and I got introduced to the B2B space by Eric, right? And so like I said, this is kind of my first ever real job. And so a lot of my friends, they're doing the B2C stuff first. And it makes a lot of sense because when you're just starting out your career, it's kind of that's the only thing that you know. And then B2B oftentimes what I've found talking to other people is like it comes a little bit later down the line because I think it's a little bit more complex of like a business from like a business perspective. And so it's like when you're doing B2C, you can relate more to your customer. You feel the pain points and you're trying to solve a pain point that like, you might feel, right? But yeah, I agree like B2B is like kind of archaic in terms of like the marketing, especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's kind of known for its like everyone kind of gets tired from LinkedIn because it's kind of like, oh, everyone's like thumping their chests and saying all these jargon words and everything like that, right? But I think that that actually presents like a pretty unique opportunity for anyone who's willing to disrupt the space because that means that like there's a lot of alpha to be like generated, right? It's like if you can be like one quote that I always kind of like to live by is like different is better than better. And what I mean by that is that like you actually like oftentimes don't need to be like the best in a field to like become successful, right? And so it's like it's all about standing out. And obviously you can't stand out like too much, but one of my friends, he brought up this term called like the purple cow, and that's how I always try to like identify myself as. And the way that I see it is like when you're trying to, stand out in a field or like generate some sort of like success in a field, it's like the way that I see it is your personal moat, like your personal brand almost, right? Should be like a combination of like this comes back to the topic of like you can't like no one can beat you at being you, and that's your authenticity, right? And so this authenticity comes and this is like the equivalent of your moat. And in my opinion, I think it comes from like everyone has different experiences in life, right? And I see like all those experiences as like vectors, and when you kind of like intersect all those vectors, well, it's like no one has that combination of vectors that you intersect, right? And so you have that point, and that's kind of like what you have to lean into and triple down on. And so yeah, I guess like we can like translate that more into like more tactical stuff, but like that's kind of like my philosophy ish.
I love this. And it actually reminds me, my background is in music and visual arts. And one of the things that we always learned was you don't have to be the best artist. It's just what makes you unique that people are going to gravitate towards. So I think this is something that everyone can do. And a lot of people on LinkedIn maybe haven't had to like think through this a lot in their careers, is like, what is my unique perspective? How can I actually show up as my authentic self? So I feel like you do that really well. And obviously, what Vireo does is very much like targeted towards this, which I do want to get into shortly. But I don't want to forget the one question that I ask everyone at the beginning of the episode, which I think is very relevant for everyone I talk to, but especially for you. I've recently seen your post about like pulling all-nighters, and you're basically one of the first employees at a very fast-growing startup. So you're probably not like sleeping that much and taking care of yourself. Is there anything that you do that's like a ritual or a wellness practice that you actually do consistently to keep you kind of sane?
You know what? That's kind of funny. I know that there's like this whole 996 kind of culture being pushed in like startups and stuff. And it was like fun for a little bit. It creates a lot of noise, right? It was kind of like what was going viral. And so like we hopped on that trend. But honestly, I think like the thing that we're focusing a lot more on nowadays, right, is not like I see like progress as like also again like two vectors, right? Where you like two levers, right? And so number one is like volume, and then number two is like quality, right? And so 996, like obviously you're kind of like pushing that volume narrative, right? And so like I think I maxed out my volume in terms of hours. Like everyone only has 24 hours in a day. And so now I'm shifting more towards like I mean, that's how you like get your reps in, right? It's like there's like a quality aspect to volume because that's how you practice, right? You put in a lot of reps until you can't like maximize that anymore, and then you start focus on quality. And so like that's the thing that I think that I've been shifting more towards is like how do I become a lot more efficient at my job, right? And so like to go back to your original question, the way that I kind of like reset is on I usually work 6 days a week. My wake up schedule's kind of been a little off recently. It's like I wake up anywhere between 7 to like 9 a.m. and then I get into the office and I work probably until like anywhere between 7 to 11 p.m. It's really variable, but I usually take Sundays off to just completely take a day off from work, and maybe not even like a complete day off, but like if I can have like at least 3 hours to unplug, no headphones, no screen, right? And just kind of like allow myself to be bored. This is where like new ideas spring up and then I come back like completely rejuvenated. To add on to that, like I like to go down to the Presidio slash like Marina area and I'll usually take the city bikes that you can rent and then like take the electric one, go all the way along the Embarcadero area and then up to Marina. And then there's like this outdoor gym that I really like going to when it's sunny, obviously. But yeah,
Sounds like a great routine. And I like what you said about basically forcing yourself to be bored. It's something that I think all of us have to do more of. And it's very tempting to just like always have your AirPods in. I've been very guilty of this recently, where you're just like, okay, even if I'm doing mundane activities, like I just want to listen to a podcast or music or whatever it is. So that's a good reminder. I got to do that more. Okay, so something that I wanted to touch on first is I feel like founder generated content has been like pretty clear that there's a need for it. Like founders should be posting on LinkedIn, they should be building in public. But something that's a little bit, I think, less prevalent is employee generated content. So I'd love to hear your take on both of those and what opportunity do you see with employee generated content in B2B?
yeah, I think that the founder-led content narrative has been kind of like more adopted mainstream. Like everyone kind of knows internally that like distribution is a very, very strong moat. And I think that a lot of founders are starting to adopt that. And we're seeing that on all of our sales calls as well. There's like an extremely high demand for this. And so basically, like the way that I see it is founder-led content is at the top, right? When you're the founder, you are literally the voice of the company, right? And then it starts trickling down. Depends what stage company you're at. But usually in like early stage startups, it's usually the founder who starts posting first about the story of the company to get other people like bought in, obviously. And then when you go into the more mature stages of a company, say for example, like a series A and beyond, like you start getting execs into the mix, right? And the companies become a little bit more verticalized. And this is where you can start deploying your executives like you did with your founders, right? And so there's like this trickle effect. And specifically within like the marketing and sales department, you usually have like your chief marketing officer, your chief revenue officer, and then it breaks down even further down like this hierarchy. And the way that I like to think about it is, yeah, you just like start with one account, you nail that first, right? And you verticalize the account to their specific niche and like what the business objectives are at the time. And for example, we can look at like a chief marketing officer, right? Like what's their goal? It's to generate pipeline. And so then you're going to deploy their LinkedIn account and, you know, you're going to create a custom strategy around it. Say, for example, they're in health tech. Yeah, you're going to like create only health tech. And the main message that we send to Virio is like, or like a thesis around content is like a message to everyone is a message to no one. And that like just points to like, you know, you need a niche down, be very specific with your audience. It might limit your reach, but overall it's going to like, you're going to become like the number one local celebrity in your space. And so that's the way that I look at it. And then it trickles down into your employees, right? And so that's like kind of the final layer where, yeah, if your employees can speak really highly of the company, like this can help literally all business initiatives. It helps with recruitment. It helps with sales. It helps with marketing, etc. And so, yeah, this is like something that a lot of companies are like starting to tap into, especially in like B2B SaaS. I think that some companies that do a really good job at this are Clay, number one. ClickUp is also doing a really good job at this. HubSpot's also doing a great job, and there's a bunch more. But yeah, it's still new though, so there's a lot of alpha to be generated.
It is. I feel like ClickUp is like the first one that I saw really doing this and also just being kind of like crazy in their content for the B2B space. So if people listening haven't seen ClickUp's social strategy, I think you should definitely check it out.
It's pretty crazy. Like I just checked. I know Instagram's less like B2B, but like they have 300,000 followers on their ClickUp account. And Chris has been doing like a pretty great job at like overseeing that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not normal for a company to, especially that kind of like what's like a project management tool. Like who would follow that? But no, they create like just real catchy stuff, like super great videos. Okay, something that I think will be very helpful going into the rest of the conversation is understanding what Vireo does because I feel like for one, you guys are just growing super fast, which is, you know, just shows how important this type of content is for the future of marketing. And you guys are also just like great at what you do. You're a great example on LinkedIn of you're like I don't really like this term, but it gets used a lot in the startup world, eating your own dog food. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about Vireo so that people understand like where you're coming from.
Yeah. So the problem, like, I'll just start off with like the problem that we're trying to solve, and it's exactly what we were just talking about, which is like we see a huge opportunity in like distribution as a moat, right? And so what we're seeing is that like you've seen in B2C already, like B2B is like super slow at adopting new trends. And so in B2C, there's this thing called UGC, which is user generated content. And this is like a marketing tactic or a marketing channel slash like campaign where you're going to employ a bunch of like external influencers to basically like create videos using your product on in like an organic way. And so you might have seen maybe for example like a Whisperflow UGC ad. They blew up earlier last quarter. And so my friend was running that and he made that campaign super successful. And that's like on the B2C side. But now we're starting to see that in B2B. And you know, one name that comes to mind is like Zoe Hartfield. I think that she was running Full and Rich's LinkedIn influencer campaign. And so she was like employing a bunch of creators on LinkedIn to start posting and like tagging Full and Rich in their content. But yeah, like in terms of what Vireo does, that's the problem that we're trying to solve is like helping executives and employees within companies like amplify their voice and create basically a moat around their company. Yeah, so it's like our one liner is we do content that drives pipeline. And so typically content and marketing, you know, the whole problem with like the marketing versus sales attribution problem, right? Where it's like, who's going to get like, how are you going to attribute that? Like, is marketing going to get like 30% for bringing in the MQL and then sales like get 70% for closing them, right? And sales is typically the one that gets favored. And that's what marketing is oftentimes frustrated by. But I think that we've found a way to like directly attribute content straight to pipeline. So it's like, okay, because we posted this post, they hopped on a meeting and they told us that they saw our content, which means that it is directly attributable to us. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the problem that we're solving. And it's not just for brand, it's not just for impressions, but it's like content can actually help drive revenue. So, yeah.
It absolutely can. And I feel like a lot more people and founders in particular are starting to realize this, but then actually executing on it. And for one, like founders are just such busy people. I feel like building out a personal brand, posting consistently is such a heavy lift for them. And with all the other stuff that they're doing, it often just gets put on the back burner when more high priority things come up. And then also like having someone champion from within the company, like how every employee should be posting on LinkedIn. I've tried to do this before. It is not easy and it is not like my core responsibility as like the founding marketer at a company. So I'd love to maybe hear a little bit about like what does this actually look like if people start working with you guys?
When people start working with us, basically, we have this model where you can think of us as like a ghostwriter on steroids. Like we do all the research for you. We provide insights, data. We have content engineers in-house who are like almost like a forward deployed model. So each executive is going to be paired with an executive at the company and they're going to be personally writing content for you. And some of our content engineers are like we try to hire the best talent. And so like we go extremely hard. I'm sure that you've seen probably like the head of CEO content like trend that's been going on LinkedIn. That's kind of like what we started. And so this person is being compensated very heavily, but in exchange, like you're going to be getting someone who understands LinkedIn down to like its deepest level, right? In terms of like engagement, in terms of what's actually going to convert. And so, yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. It's, think of us as like an executive ghostwriter slash go-to-market strategist, an extension of your go-to-market team on the content side. Yeah.
Super cool. And I am thinking that a lot of people are starting to realize how they can't just tell AI they want to write about a topic and then AI like spits out this thing that's going to be amazing content that people actually connect with. So I guess like what would you say to people? And I'm sure as a salesperson you hear this sometimes is like, why don't I just use AI to do this? Why do I use you guys?
Yeah, you know what? That's it's like a hot topic right now because it's like AI is getting really good, I think. It's just the problem is when it's missing context, right? And so we're like the way that I see it, the way that I'm currently using AI in my stack right now is I see it as two categories that I mix together. And so on one end, I have a content format that's a proven format that's going to go viral on LinkedIn that people recognize. And as soon as something comes up on the feed, an example of this is maybe like your typical YC announcement post, right? Like as soon as you see that YC logo, and as soon as you see someone like, hey, I just got into YC, you're going to stop, watch it, right? And it blows up. And that's like a format. And obviously that's not as scalable. So there are different like formats that we use. But then on the other side is the context problem, right? Where it's like, how do you put all the niche information that you have in your brain? Like, because AI is not, it probably can find it, but it doesn't know the nuances of like your problem, you know? And so you have to combine those two together to like make tasteful content. But that's like really hard for AI to do, right? Unless you prompt it really well and give it all of your brain, basically, like a second brain, you know? And so, yeah, I kind of lost the thread there. So I don't, what was the original question?
No, I think you answered it because the question was, what would you say to someone who says like, why don't I just use AI for this? And I think this is the point, right? Like you need another person who is going to ask you the right questions and get all the context and then do all the research that actually is relevant for you and your business versus like AI could talk about anything, you know?
Yeah. The you know, to that point, like I think the other problem with AI is that it's like too generalized. Like humans are really good bullshit detectors, okay? And so when I'm reading through LinkedIn, LinkedIn already is like even before AI. I remember I guess I wasn't on LinkedIn before AI, but like I can imagine that on LinkedIn, like the reason why LinkedIn is like, oh my, like everyone kind of like sighs when they think LinkedIn content is because everyone sounds the same, right? And so this goes back to my original point. And so when AI writes, it sounds the same. Like there are certain cadences and like certain words that AI uses, right? And so it's like we can detect immediately when something is like an authentic and original idea on like that. And just from the way that it's worded, there's something like very human about like handwritten content, you know? And so that's like the whole concept of taste. It's describing one thing in like from your own unique perspective. And that's just something that AI I don't think will probably ever be able to do unless you literally have a clone of yourself.
Literally. Well, I think it's cool because I saw this article from I think Business Insider it was that recently shared about like the hottest new jobs in tech are copywriters. And I think it's exactly for this reason, right? Like you cannot replicate the way that a human brain puts words together, especially people who are great writers that are just great communicators and know how to like put these concepts into things that are actually interesting to read and unique. Kind of again going back to that point. I don't know. I think there's like we're on the kind of backlash of AI right now.
Yeah, it's like it's the whole thing with what I originally said, right? Where it's like before, like maybe a couple of years ago, it was actually like very beneficial to like write with AI and like no one could know and people would be like, "Oh my God, you're writing so good," right? Like this is fantastic. I'm going to engage with it, right? But now that everyone's doing it, everyone's getting tired of it, and now everything's the same. Now it's like sometimes what I do with my content is like write like make spelling mistakes on purpose and like put punctuation mistakes on. Sometimes I won't leave a period. Sometimes I'll put like two exclamation marks. Sometimes I'll like I won't use M dashes anymore, right? Sometimes I'll like replace an M dash with a comma or like leave eyes uncapitalized because it's just like those little things are signals that show like, wait a sec, no, at least this character was written by AI, you know?
Isn't that
So
crazy
yeah,
though?
yeah, yeah.
I saw yesterday a post of someone that basically just took like part of a Shakespeare play, which had probably like five M dashes within 10 lines. And they're like, well, Shakespeare was using AI. It's just
Right.
crazy.
Yeah, because some people actually use M dashes and like that's like proper punctuation, but
Yeah, I
I
actually
guess
love
ChatGPT
I
is just
love an M dash, and I think I have a newsletter as well, so I think I might have to write like ode to the M dash because it's just sad. I love that. I love that piece of punctuation, and it's just been slightly taken from me, but I still use it. I just use it with spaces, which I always have, but I use spaces around it, and I don't use the long M dash. I use like the medium length one,
right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Anyway, something you said earlier that I think is interesting for us to talk about is like knowing what content goes viral. And I'm curious from your perspective, do you feel like going viral is always like what you're trying to do? Or for specific employees, does it make more sense to really like have a small audience, but, post about very specific topics? Do we all need to go viral?
Yeah. No, that's a good question because I think that when people think of social media content, like the goal is always like impressions, engagement, right? I think that people need to like start switching their definition of success. Obviously, it depends on what business outcomes you're trying to drive. This is B2B at the end of the day, right? And so at Vireo, what we're trying to do again is like content that drives pipeline. It's not content that drives like brand, although that might be a byproduct, right? And so I think that the way that I frame it is you don't always need to go viral. Actually, some of the most powerful content is not content that goes viral and for the masses. It's the content that's extremely niche for a specific industry, and even within that industry, specific company, and within the company, a specific person, right? And so that's what we're kind of like specialized in is something called like account-based marketing, right? Where it's like if you can create content for a specific company and like even like on a specific person and do deep research on that person's work and then maybe like shout them out on LinkedIn, that creates like a really good piece of content. And then also like another piece of content that or a format that we use is I think when or actually wait a sec, let me back up for a sec there. Right now, I think that LinkedIn is in its like Vine era, right? And so basically it's super early. Now, if you go into any executive's LinkedIn account, like you're gonna see maybe they'll have like thousands of followers and like so many eyeballs on them, but in their content section, they've done like reposts of like some random events that they've attended, right? And so this is like building their personal brand a little bit maybe for their like friends, family, and stuff like that, but and their close colleagues, but it's not really driving measurable business impact. And so this is where there's a lot of alpha to be gained, where if you even start posting anything for like a week straight, like you can, if you're in a very niche industry, like you can become the leader in that industry. Like say for example, like in health tech, one of our head of health tech has literally become like the number one creator. I believe I'm not in that bubble, so but that's what she claims. But basically like she's become like really credible in that space because she's like doing research on specific trending topics, right? And then posting about it and just like becoming like that source of truth, right? And that can be done through a variety of different formats. It can be like through entertainment content, right? Where it's like humorous. It can be like picking at little language things that they say. It can be like educational content and then which is like kind of thought leadership. And then it can also be like personal storytelling content where you incorporate kind of like your personal life into it to make it more authentic. But yeah, long story short, you definitely don't need to go viral. It's actually better to like I want to add another thread in there where in B2B, the difference between B2B and B2C is that in B2C, you need a shitload of people to buy your product. It's a low ticket stuff. Let's take a SaaS subscription, for example, where maybe you have like a health and wellness tracker, right? And so this health and wellness tracker takes $20 a month and you probably need like so many people to buy it, right? And in that way, maybe virality is supposed to be your go-to-market strategy. But when you're talking about like big enterprise deals that are worth like hundreds of thousands of dollars all the way up to like the millions, like usually there are specific decision makers that hold the budgets, right? And so you only need to get in front of a very small subset of the people that you think that you need to get in front of to like get that process going. And so yeah.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like something that I've noticed with maybe not so much startup founders because they already know that they're supposed to be doing these like scrappy things to just, grow their business. But I do feel like there's a little bit of like risk aversion with posting the wrong thing. So how do you guys work with executives, for example, that are just doing like the resharing of whatever event they're going to be speaking at to actually putting out like their own thoughts and, whatever other content they might be creating?
No, I completely understand all of that because To be completely honest, at a startup, we have a longer leash with our brand and our reputation, right? And we're able to be more risky because, you don't have as much on the line. And so like these big companies, like it makes full sense that like you're not going to be letting your employees post content, right? And so like the way that we deal with it at Vireo, especially for our clients, is that we have a content interview process, right? So we're going to be doing a two-way thing. And this is where like the human comes in to make sure that everything is going according to plan. Like it's a white glove service, right? And so your content is going to be QA'd by this content engineer. And then on top of that, it needs to be QA'd by the what we call the face of content, the FOC. Okay, that's our acronym for it. And so basically this person is going to be QAing and just approving each one manually and then giving feedback so that we can iterate and make it better.
Okay, that makes sense. I do feel like that's one of the fears from outsourcing, like writing, especially whether it's emails or social media posts. When you outsource this to a marketer or an agency or a company like you guys, it is scary to like have someone write in your own voice and it's going out as if it's you. So I think that is another place where not like fully automating this with AI, for example, is just like really important.
Yep, I completely agree with that.
Okay, so if people are listening, they're like, okay, I guess it's like time to start putting out more content, even, testing it for a week, like you said. I have seen like crazy things from just posting more consistently and pretty quickly as well. So, what from your perspective, since you're like in this every single day, are there specific formats? You already mentioned, like when certain posts are structured in a way that it's just going to work better. So, what are you seeing right now on LinkedIn that is working well?
So there's two formats that come top of mind for me. Number one is like a more personal format, and then number two is something that might, generate you a little bit more authority, like within the space as like a thought leader, right? And so number one is like a personal story. A post that I recently did got about like 50,000 impressions, and so this is like what I consider more top of funnel, but it's like really just sharing what your like story kind of is, right? And so there's this format where it's like you introduce yourself almost. You like make yourself into like a launch video, right? But it's like not a video, it's just a post, right? But it's like you can walk through the different parts of your career. For me, since I'm a little bit earlier on, I just walked through the stages, like the phases of my schooling, right? So I said like elementary school, like year zero, I was born. Like year eight, I almost got expelled from middle school or something like that, right? And then in year 18, I got into Western University, did computer science, right? And so like people love a good like personal story. Like this is going to be evergreen content. Like I said at the beginning, like no one can compete against you like on being you, right? And so this is where you can combine that. And typically it does like pretty well. People want to support other people. Now on the business side, one format that can position you is really like creating content about the conversations that you've had with your customers, right? And so say for example, I'm having a conversation with you, right? Or say, for example, I'm having a conversation with a VP of marketing at like a go-to-market SaaS company. Let's take Clay, for example. And I'll be like, I recently just had a conversation with the VP of marketing at Clay. Here are three things that I've learned and that I might be doing with their go-to-market strategy, right? And then I'll have like bullet point number one, two, three. And so it's like the main thing with LinkedIn content is to make it super skimmable. People are not trying to read like blocks of text. They're not trying to read articles. They're here for entertainment and quick like TikTok volume snippets of information. So yeah.
What about video?
Vireo was actually originally like our thesis was video because video, I think, creates the most trust where you can literally see the person, right? And it's not just their words. I think that earlier in the year, my co-founders were talking, LinkedIn was pushing video quite heavily. Like you'd have this person with like 2,000 followers, not a lot on LinkedIn, and this video would get like a million impressions, right? And so it was like kind of crazy. I think it was like back in like January to March-ish of 2025, where they were heavily pushing it. But I think that they pulled back a little bit on it. So I'm not too sure where I stand in terms of like my bullishness on that. But I think that video is really good to like almost anchor your personal brand back down, right? So let's say, for example, you're doing something maybe a little bit more rage baity to like get impressions, right? And so you do that, but then like your next post would be a video where you're showing yourself kind of like more openly and more humanly, right? And so it does like these forces kind of like counteract each other when you're building up your personal brand. Yeah. So I'm still bullish on it. Yes.
Okay, so one of the things I want to end on is you said that founders shouldn't necessarily just be concerned with impressions. Like initially, content was really all about that. But again, in the B2B space, it oftentimes helps to just be very targeted, like what is actually going to drive revenue for you. So, what should founders actually be looking at to measure success with user generated or with like their own content or employee generated content?
I think like the metrics that founders should be looking at is like, I'm going to be talking strictly in terms of like a B2B sales kind of like led growth motion. I'm not as familiar with the product led growth side of things, so I can't speak on that too much. But for the sales side, I'm also like basically owning all like the top of funnel. And so top of funnel also includes marketing. So the way that I look at it is like, yes, you should be looking at your impressions, but more importantly than that, you should be, because impressions does lead to like more pipeline. Like there is a correlation there, no doubt about that. But I think that the metrics that you should be looking at is like how many meetings is it actually getting booked for you that are directly attributable or indirectly attributable to that post, right? And so what you should be doing is like once you create the content, once you put it out there, targeted to a specific person, you should be doing something called like warm outbound to them, right? And so this just means like sending out a LinkedIn DM, sending out a connection request, number one, to all the people that you take and all the decision makers and all the people that you want to like get involved in that sales process. Number two is to message them with that first message, have that personalized, and then oftentimes they're not going to respond. And so that's where your follow-up motion comes in. You follow up with them on LinkedIn and then bonus points if you want to multi-thread. And usually companies have this like built out already, but at Video, we literally only do LinkedIn. We should probably get that email motion going and like the cold call motion going. But yeah, so like bonus points if you multi-thread, and that's where your conversion is actually going to be. And so then like once you get them onto a call, that's how you can kind of like attribute that to the post. And you can be like, hey, like, have you seen our content? You can either directly ask, but oftentimes they'll be like, yeah, like in small talk, they'll be like, yeah, I've been seeing your posts around, and that's like a reason why I booked this meeting. And the whole like currency in B2B is trust. So yeah, it really does drive the needle.
Well, I'm glad you said that too about it's not just like putting out a post and then that's it. I feel like for one, there's certain things you should be doing on LinkedIn, whether it's, responding to comments like quickly or again, like you said, you actually need to be then following up with those people. So I like the tip of leading with like, hey, have you like seen our content or like was there something specific that resonated? Are there any other things that you would suggest or that you've seen work? Because I know you get most of your, if not all of your business, I don't know, from LinkedIn. So like what are some things like hooks or questions that you ask that actually a lot of people end up responding to?
Yeah. And so one thing that I use from my personal account, and so there's different messaging and copy that you can use for different types of accounts. Now, say for example, you have the CEO's account, right? So Eric might be DMing. That's a completely different message than if I were to DM somebody because I'm clearly more junior and there is a level of kind of like assessment when someone is viewing your message, who the person is from, right? And so when I'm doing it, I'm using more of like a passive voice, right? Where it's like not pushing too hard, right? I am still giving like the main value prop. I am setting the pain point, right? I'm reaching out to them because they have this pain point, and I sometimes word it as like, was wondering if you were up for a chat, right? So I use that specific wording, was wondering if. That's like, I think almost one of the best ways that you can ask someone for a chat. And then right after that, I ask. So that's like making the ask. And then right after that, I put like, well, what's in it for me? Obviously, there's something in it for me. I'm not going to like try to fool you with it. Was hoping to share some content formats that have been crushing it for us recently, right? And so that's where you add the value and also share what you're going to be gaining out of it, right? It's like a transaction, right? So yeah. And then like sometimes what I see Eric DM is, since he's more of an authority, what he does is like sometimes he'll send the post, like a post from their profile to them again, right? And be like, hey, I was just skimming through your profile, noticed this post, really loved it, and like put a personalized blurb in there about like some insight that he drew from the post. And then he'll be like, was wondering if you'd be up for some feedback. Think that there are some things that we can tweak that would definitely like increase the engagement. And oftentimes like people are open to feedback. They always want to be making their stuff better. And so that way you'll get a response, and then that way you can add value by giving them like proper consulting advice.
I love that. I'm going to take that into my own work. So those are really great tips. Jeremy, I have one more question which is focused on you, and that is, what is something that you're excited about both in your personal and in your professional life right now?
I think that my personal and professional life like merge because like my entire life right now is work, right? And I truly do enjoy it. I think that work is like a vehicle for my like self fulfillment and self actualization, right? And so the thing that I'm most excited about is to continue like crushing it at work. Now, for me, that means owning this top of funnel pipeline metric. How many SQLs am I driving for my sales team? Right. And so I see this as like a little video game. Like, what levers do I have to pull? Do I have to like make better content? Do I have to get better impressions? Or do I have to be sending out more volume of DMs? And so honestly, that's probably like the most exciting thing for me is like the rate of growth at which like, yeah, Vireo is like growing. Like we just added $30 million in, I mean, not 30 million, that would be insane. $1 million in ARR in the last 30 days. And so like we're skyrocketing right now, and we just like need to have more pipeline for that to like continue our rate of growth. And so yeah, that's what I'm excited for, is just to, like grow Vireo to the moon.
It's pretty epic. And yeah, I feel like there's nothing quite like being part of a fast growing startup and just the energy that that gives you when you've got a great team. So definitely been there. Amazing. Well, for the last question, I just have, where can people connect with you and just also follow all your great content, because you're also putting out super interesting stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Just go follow me on LinkedIn. That's about it. I'm on LinkedIn basically 10 hours a day, 10, 12 hours a day. So just shoot me a DM and I'm happy to, connect and help out where I can.
Awesome. Yeah. I also have been living on LinkedIn, so it's the
Your
place to be, I
content's been
guess.
popping off, so I am
Thank you.
excited to see more of it.
Thank you so much. Jeremy, this was such a cool conversation. I really appreciate all your time and your insights, and I'm sure it's going to be super valuable for everyone listening.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Growing Startups. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to give us a rating so more people can find the show. So happy you're here, and see you in the next one.